is another reason why working out bad for your health.
I'm not ever going to encourage you to commit a crime, at least not one that I do not personally benefit from.
We're going to establish certain dress codes for certain movies from now on.
You got to watch it naked.
I fucked that up. I'm sorry, reverse it. There's only.
I actually don't love David Caruso.
I think you nailed it.
This is what he should be doing all the time because I'm fucking amazing.
Yes. Oh, I've made a terrible mistake.
Oh, Jesus.
Or even Nazi gators.
You're a soft G.
People just know me, man.
You're a household name in your household.
Oh my God.
You're an idiot.
Welcome to the Scare Bears podcast, where being underrated is a good thing. As always, I am joined by my amazing co-host, Rev Horror. Rev, how are you tonight?
I am doing wonderfully well. How are you, Ken?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
Once again, Ken does not introduce himself.
Well, yeah, you're not. You know what? People just know me, man.
You're not a household name, Ken. I keep trying to tell you this.
That's true. I'm not a household name. I don't know.
Not yet.
I feel like that's on other people, not on me.
That's
all
fair.
I'm saying.
That's fair. You're a household name in your household. That's something.
That's all I got. That's all I know, that I'm in the right house. Technically, half the time is I just walk in and just like, hey, what's my name? And people are just like, don't know you, and I'm like, oop, wrong house.
Oh, I gotta stop leaving your damn house unlocked.
Anyway, today we are going to be discussing the most underrated, overlooked horror films of all time. We have our original top 10 list ready to go, and I think that this is going to be one of my favorite categories, because I think that when it comes to underrated or overlooked horror movies, there's like this sense of just like, they're not underrated to you, but it's like when you talk to people and you're like, hey, have you seen this? So like, man, I've never even heard of that.
Absolutely.
But like, to you, you're like, that's amazing. So yes, when I was putting my list together personally, I was trying to go through like the conversations that I had where I've been like, oh, you got to see this movie, and people were just like, I haven't even heard of that movie. So how about you? What did you do when you put yours?
It kind of the same thing. I kind of did a mixture. My movies are a combination of movies that people haven't seen and movies that I don't think people give the credit that they should. So it's kind of a combination between both things, because there are some movies on my list, especially. I obviously can't speak to yours because I didn't make it and I don't know it, but on my list there are a lot of movies that I list that I tell somebody, they're like, what? I'm not going to watch that shit. And I'm like, no, you just trust me, it's not as bad as it sounds. So there are so many things that for me, and I think that's horror as a genre is full of that. It's just no, hold on, give this movie a chance. It is dumb, yes, you're right, but you need to see it. And so to me, it's a nice combination of movies that, are relatively mainstream movies, but just don't get the love they deserve, and movies that people dismissed out of hand, and they absolutely should. So it's a nice little mixture of both.
Yeah, I definitely think that I got a couple of things in mind that I would have followed that thing where it's just like, not only have you not heard of them, but also like, dude, you gotta revisit. You gotta take another look. You gotta go back and take another gander on this movie, because I feel like you're missing something when you say that you don't like it, or you're just going to dismiss it out of cloth, Well,
I'm just saying you can't say The Exorcist again. That's all.
Oh, okay, mister. I think that your number one's probably going to be what? Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yes, that's the underrated horror movie, is the one that everybody fucking loves. Come on, man. Give me a little bit of credit.
Number 10 on my list is The Exorcist. No, kidding. I'm just kidding.
Whatever, man. I know how much you love that movie. Disgust me.
I feel like vastly missing the mark on that one, good sir. That's it. You know what? I'll make you a deal. All
right.
Before the next episode, I will go back and I will watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Last House on the Left. Your call, okay?
All right.
But you got to rewatch The Exorcist, and then we can come back and we'll talk.
Okay, done.
Which one do you want me to do?
Last House on the Left.
You want to go back and watch Last House on the Left?
Easy. Easy, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like, everybody fucking knows Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You got to go back and experience Last House on the Left. You got to watch it naked.
I feel like I experienced it the first time. Gotta watch it naked.
No, don't do that.
It's just like window open, just so people are.
Look, the window's up to you, man.
Walking by, like, oh, that guy's just sitting there. What's he watching? And then you look at the TV and it's like,
oh Jesus.
Oh God. Oh no.
We need to call somebody.
Yeah, I think I gotta. Yeah, do we have to call somebody on this guy?
All right. I got you, man.
Doctor that's sitting outside is just like, oh Oh, I've made a terrible mistake.
I should have brought more cops.
All right. Let's get into it, though. Let's dive right in. I am so excited. Okay, Rev, hit me with your number 10 most overlooked, underrated.
All right, number 10. And I do have to say, I've got a couple of honorable mentions this week, too, because there's so many to choose from, because especially where people that aren't horror movie fans, they really only know, your Jasons, your Freddys, your Michaels, that kind of stuff. So really tough to choose a lot of these. Number 10, I think, was the one I debated the most as to whether or not it should be included. But I included it for one main reason, and we'll get to that in a second. Number 10, I have The Funhouse.
Who will dare to face the challenge of the Funhouse? Who is brave enough? How about you, sir?
Super underappreciated because it's a Tobe Hooper movie. And everybody, when you say Tobe Hooper, you always think, well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You always think Poltergeist, or, if you're especially out there, what he did, Life Force 2, right? But I think people only watch that for one reason, or two reasons, I should say. The Funhouse, though, is super underrated because it's a great, stupid, fun slasher movie. It's not his best by any means, but it's super fun. It has fantastic creature design, and it's a movie that I think most people haven't seen at all, and if they have, they haven't watched it in the last decade. It's a long way from his best, but it's such a fun watch.
Interesting, and honestly, I have never seen it. So yeah, that totally
counts. It's not great. It's fun.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on Rotten Tomatoes just to give people an idea. It is 67% on the audience score, but that's only 21 reviews. So talk about underrated on a horror movie. Only 21 reviews on
for Tobe Hooper. 21 reviews. That's crazy.
43% on the critic score. So.
Yeah, well, I'm a critic, and I give it.
Oh wait, no, I fucked that up. I'm sorry. Reverse it. There's only 21 reviews in the critic score. 67%, so that means actually pretty fresh. Not certified fresh, but pretty fresh. Sorry, audience score 43%, but only 5,000. So, when you really think about it, that's still really, really low for Rotten Tomatoes.
It's still really, really low again for Tobe Hooper.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why it made the list.
Let's do a little comparison here. Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's go. Well, just the 2020 version, just for fun.
Sure.
Yeah, so Nightmare on Elm Street has 100,000 ratings. So 5,000, right. Yes, that's definitely an underappreciated movie, sir. Well played on the first one, yes. Okay, so this I have to add to my list now to watch it. Everybody else should be adding it to their list. Fantastic. So what is your favorite scene, would you say, in the Funhouse?
Man, I don't know. The ending is batshit crazy. It goes from kind of being like almost like a suspensey, like, circus funhousey type movie to just this like straight up monster movie at the ending. Almost like a Beauty and the Beast type story, or like a King Kong type story, which I believe is probably a closer comparison, out of something that otherwise just seems like almost like Clown House or something like that, So nice. It's wild. It's especially the ending. It is definitely slow, and again, it is far from Hooper's best, but it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, yeah, definitely gonna have to check that one out. Maybe after I end up watching Last House on the Left.
Yes, but you can put your pants back on for the Funhouse.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
Not your shirt.
Maybe, yeah,
you can put your pants on.
We're gonna establish certain dress codes for certain movies from now on.
That works.
Scare Bears podcast brought to you by peeking in your neighbor's window while they're watching movies.
I also want to say I do not endorse that one. That I'm not ever going to encourage you to commit a crime, at least not one that I do not personally benefit from.
There you go. All right, number 10 on mine. And I think that you and I maybe have talked briefly about this film. I know that we've definitely talked about it with other people on Slasher. And there's our Slasher mention for the episode. Again, for those of you who have not listened to the first two, Slasher is a social media horror movie collaborative. It's kind of like an Instagram type thing for people who love horror movies. If you love horror movies, love talking about horror movies, love watching horror movies, or just love GIFs of horror movies being posted in your timeline, Slasher is the place for you.
Hold on for a second. I'm going to stop you right there. Did you just say GIF?
Yeah.
No, that's not how you pronounce that word.
Definitely.
No, it's definitely not.
It definitely is.
Why would you say that? What's wrong with you? It's GIF.
It's
what does it stand for?
Graphic interface image, right? Or it stands for. I'm looking it up right now. GIF or GIF.
Are you telling me it doesn't stand for graphical?
It doesn't stand for graphical.
No, it stands for graphical, correct?
Okay, I'm a fat man, and I like to compare it to my peanut butter, which is GIF.
That's fine, but it's not peanut butter. It's a GIF.
All right.
I'll let you move on, but that's...
I am going to cut all of this out, and I will go back and pronounce it with you.
Correctly, you mean? No, you don't have to cut it out. Leave it in here. You need to put this up as our poll for this episode.
Right.
How do you pronounce
Popularly
GIF?
rendered in English as one syllable word. The acronym is most commonly pronounced GIF, soft G as in gem, so GIF. So it could be a hard G or a soft G, differing on the phenom represented by the letter G.
You're a soft G.
So I'm just saying. Both versions of GIF are technically correct. You know what? From now on, I'm literally going to I'm going to work the word into as much as I can, and I'm just going to pronounce it either way, both times.
Just back and forth.
Just back and forth, right? So one time I'm going to say GIF, the next time I'm going to say GIF. So
that works. I dig it.
So yes, anyway, back to what I was saying.
Anyway, sorry for the tangent.
So yeah, Slasher is an amazing app and everybody should join. And if Slasher wants to sponsor this underrated podcast, overlooked podcast, even though I don't know if you could be overlooked when you're in episode 3, then, we're all for it because cannot stress enough how much of giant whores that we are.
Absolutely. Both of us just straight up whores. Dirty, dirty whores. Send us money.
What is that? The Jack Nicholson movie where he's the devil and he's like, and what? Oh my God, now I can't. I hate getting old. Oh my God, I love this movie too. With Susan Sarandon and Cher.
I have no idea what movie you're talking about.
You have no idea what I'm talking about?
I have no idea.
The Witches of Eastwick.
Oh, okay.
So the Witches of Eastwick, there's this one scene where he's trying to, they're trying to take revenge on the Christian woman in town, and he's like, he's passing out a bowl of cherries, and every time that the women one that's in the room, she starts like just spewing cherries out of her mouth, and but the way that she says it, she's like, "Ooh, they're just a bunch of whores."
Bunch of whores.
Just a bunch of whores. Anyway, all right. I'm sorry, I got off track as usual. Bunch of nonsense and a tangent. Welcome back, Ken. Number 10 on my list is The Final Girls.
It's happening. We have to warn her. No, just think of them as animals on a nature preserve, okay? Our duty is not to disrupt, but to observe.
Ooh.
I think The Final Girls is a vastly underappreciated, underrated movie. It is meta upon meta, right? So it's like you take the meta-ness of like a Tucker and Dale, which we've already talked about, or the meta-ness of like a Cabin in the Woods, which you've already talked about. But you then put the meta on top of a meta where it takes place in a movie on top of a movie.
Metaception?
Metaception. And then when they do like the flashback scenes and the way that they take those off in terms of like when he's doing the flashback scene, see how the killer got started, but then the screen turns to gray and then starts to crystallize as it goes down. And then like just the whole point of just like him going off, the killer killing somebody in the woods and then stopping because that part of the movie is done with while these teens are being sucked into the movie and interacting with the movie in the background. It is, I think, vastly underappreciated. Final Girls came out in 2015. I think is my number 10 underrated, overlooked horror movie.
That's a good answer. I've only seen it once and I did not like it when I watched it. Mm-hmm. And I think that I don't know why I didn't, and I have been told numerous times by people since then to try it again, and I definitely want to because like I love Malin Ackerman. I love her to death. I don't like the Farmiga girl. I don't really like her too much. But
Cassia?
Yeah, is that how you pronounce that? I had no idea.
I mean, that's how I'm going to pronounce it. But I mean, I pronounce GIF GIF or GIF GIF. So,
that's true. You're an idiot. No, I like I said, I would really like to watch it again because it's a movie that I should have enjoyed and I did. So I feel like I need to like redo it or something.
Mm-hmm. I just feel like because you like slashers like as your favorite genre,
right?
Since and I can't get away from saying the word meta, but it's the best way to describe it. It's just like if you were in a slasher movie yourself, like you got sucked into a slasher movie, this is what you would experience. And I feel like they just did a very good job of it, of not only the callback to the way that movies were made when that movie was being made, of like 1980s classic slasher, but also just the interaction of it from within that film perspective. Yeah, I actually really like that movie. It's funny you say that because it's a very divisive movie because I watched it with two of my friends who also don't mind horror movies. I mean, they like horror movies fine. And after they were done, they were just like, well, that was a movie. And I was just like, that was a great movie. So
don't you hate that too? When you watch a movie with people and they don't feel about it the way that you do. Either way, honestly, whether you love it or whether you hate it.
Yeah. There was the one time that I've yelled at somebody in the movie theater was we saw King Kong, the remake of King Kong. And it's not one of my favorite movies, suffice to say. We'll just cap it at that. But after the movie was over, there was a guy that started clapping in the theater, and I stood up in the back of the theater, and I was just like, "Stop it! Stop it right now! That does not deserve to be clapped for!" The random asshole in the back of the theater shouting.
That is aggressive, man. Kudos. Kudos.
Just so much I could expound upon how much that movie was terrible. Just so much, and how Peter Jackson just needs to be introduced to any editing machine in the world.
Here's the thing, though.
Just I don't think that he knows that they exist.
Yeah, I have not seen Peter Jackson's King Kong because I have no fucking desire to see Peter Jackson's King Kong. But what I will say is, if you stand up in a movie theater and clap at the end, you're a fucking asshole. So I don't care how bad the movie was. Fuck that guy.
There you go. So,
fuck
actually,
that guy.
Get in the comments on that, people. If you clap after a movie is over in today's age, are you the asshole? AITA for clapping after a movie's over in the theater. I'm very curious. Get in the comments.
If it's not 100%, I'm going to beat the shit out of every single one of you.
So from now on, whenever we go see a movie with Rev, we're going to have to turn and then look at him to see if he claps. We'll wait like a 5 minute, 10 seconds, beat. Oh, it's not going to wait. His hands are coming. Oh, no, he's just clasping his hand under his chin. Okay, that's not going to, okay, no clap.
Now, see, I thought you were going to say we have to turn around, look at him, and start clapping. Like assert dominance.
All right.
Just a slow clap.
Just a slow clap, too.
Just to piss me off.
All right. Moving on to number 9. What's your number 9?
Okay, so number 9. Number 9, this one's just straight up sexism. I've got Jennifer's Body at number 9.
Do you buy all your murder weapons at Home Depot? God, you butch.
Female writer-director, female stars, dealing with the female experience, including female friendship, which is a different beast altogether from what they usually show in movies. And it's marketed as a sexy teen film about Megan Fox, which is a goddamn shame because it's a fantastic horror movie. It's way scarier than you would expect it to be. The effects are incredible. And I gotta be honest, I put this movie off for years because I thought it was going to be god-awful. And there was none of the marketing would lead you to believe that it's gonna not be anything other than terrible. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one to pass up a teen sex comedy, but it's also not the top of my priority list. And I finally watched it just a few years ago and I couldn't believe how fantastic it was. I think it's a quintessential example of an underappreciated movie, and it's literally no one's fault but the production companies who completely mishandled it. I mean, Amanda Seyfried was amazing. It's a phenomenal movie, and nobody gave a shit. And that's a shame.
You're not going to get an argument from me on this one. Like, I think that is a perfect example of a movie where you're talking to somebody and you're just like, oh, did you see Jennifer's Body? Because you're right. It is such a good movie in its own right. Like, it's like not one of those where you would immediately look for, but like at the same token, like you're watching it and you're just like, yeah, all right. It's like a slow clap of a movie where like it builds up. But yes, I'm just like, you're talking to somebody, you're just like, you ever seen Jennifer's Body? And they're just like, oh, that fucking movie? And you're like, no, man, not that fucking movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's, like I said, it's just, I remember I was actually going to watch it, and I sat down to watch it with my wife, and she was like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm like, well, I mean, I watched it, I think, for some, like, back-to-school special I did on the site or whatever, and we watched it, and she was like, holy shit, that was actually really fucking good. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, she's like, you're just watching it because it's Megan Fox. I'm like, yeah, okay, so.
Yeah, that's why I started watching
That's why I started watching it. I finished watching it for the feels. That's a great movie. It's a great movie, and it's super underrated, and that's why it made my list.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely agree with you on that. Like, I think that's a really good number 9 pick for absolutely. Now my number 9 is gonna go in kind of a different direction than Jennifer's Body. It's actually a sequel because I actually feel like this sequel's better than the original. It's Unfriended 2.
No, AJ! No! Go to the stage! On the ground! AJ! No, AJ! No! Go to the stage!
No! AJ! No! AJ!
No! 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 Good God!
Ooh.
And let me tell you why. I'm going to defend Unfriended 2, right? Because Unfriended adds what it was, right? The movie shot on webcam in terms of that, but it added that whole supernatural element to it, like the spirit of the girl was going to come back and kill these people through the computer. Again, spoilers. I should really, in the show comments, just put, there are going to be spoilers talked about.
Yes.
In this podcast.
Yeah, but again,
just do a blanket.
If we're not reviewing a new movie, if we're not talking about a new movie, fuck off. Watch these movies. They're old.
Fair point.
It's not our fault you haven't seen a movie in the last 20 years.
Don't fuck off. But
No, don't fuck off. Listen. You still gotta listen.
Sit out. Sit out and listen.
Yeah. Shh. Just shh.
Again, subscribe. Just play through. Don't have to listen.
That's right.
Just letting you guys know.
We don't care.
This episode of Scare Bears Podcast brought to you by Apathy.
Ambient.
But no, okay, so Unfriended 2. Unfriended 1 was okay, right? So then I watched Unfriended 2, and unfortunately, as I've gotten older, my eyesight has gone a little bit. But the first time that I watched it, I was a little further away, and I couldn't read what they were typing, on the computer screen and things like that. But even when I couldn't do that, I was just taken with how good the realism of that movie was, because it's like it takes the supernatural element out of it, and it's just like, no, you gone fucked up by stealing this laptop, and they're gonna come after you and all your friends for having talked to them with this laptop that you stole it. And then you go back, and I watched it with my glasses on, sitting a little closer, and I watched as they were typing the conversations and messages that they were getting, the programs that they were using. Totally works. It totally makes sense. Everything about it is, I think fantastic. And it's one of those, I think, that is like the sequel's better than the original for sure. I highly recommend, if you have watched it and you didn't like it, but even if you have not seen it, I would watch Unfriended 2 before I would watch Unfriended.
Interesting. So I need to address this a little bit because I fucking love Unfriended. Unfriended is one of my favorites, just because it's just, until the last literally 2 seconds of the movie, I love it. The last 2 seconds almost fucked the whole thing up. The whole closing the laptop ghost thing. They could have just cut that and it would have been a fantastic movie. But I
agree with you on that.
I really, really love Unfriended. But I will also say Unfriended Dark Web is fantastic. It's excellent. And you're right. They do take the supernatural piece out of it and make it more of a dark web story. And like, there's just something creepy about the dark web in general. Knowing that it's a real thing and knowing that shit like this can happen. I'm with you, man. It's a creepy movie. Now, I do like the first one a lot better, but that's only because I fucking love the first one. Because Dark Web's great. I agree with you entirely.
Yeah, and I get that too, because like I said, I mean, I really liked Unfriended as well. Like, I think that there's something a little bit more crazier in today's age, with more and more people trying to explore the dark web and not really knowing what they're doing.
Oh, sure.
More and more in terms of what the internet is capable of. That there's something a little bit more scary about the Unfriended, the dark web, because it really is just a realistic version of what could happen if you really did think that you were this computer guy and this hacker and trying to do these things, but you just hacked the wrong thing, and the consequences of that. Unfriended 2, that's my number 9.
I can't disagree with you, and I can tell you, as someone who's poked around a little bit in that realm, it's scary. I actually stopped doing it. I had downloaded Tor and all that stuff and went through to just kind of see what I could find, and I'm like, I'm gonna click on the wrong thing, and I'm going to go to prison or I'm going to get murdered. One of those two things is going to happen. So I just deleted it, and I was like, nah, that's cool. I can say I've been. That's it's kind of like going to Florida. Like, I've been to Florida. Don't need to go back. I'm either going to be in prison or get murdered. It's the exact same story.
Just to keep all of our fans and listeners in Florida, I enjoy going to Florida, even though I don't. But it's a great state, even though it's not. And totally think that everybody should go. You can miss it.
I am going to go on official record in the Scare Bears podcast and say, fuck the whole state of Florida. If you live in Florida and you're listening to us, you're awesome. Leave Florida, because fuck Florida. Just get out. Get the fuck out of Florida and keep listening to the podcast. But your state blows. I'm not going to pull any punches. I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Florida's some wonderland. No, it's a fucking dilapidated hellscape filled with Nazis and alligators. Why the fuck would you go to Florida?
Or even Nazi gators.
Nazi gators, which honestly would make a great fucking horror movie.
I like what you're thinking there.
Nazi gators.
All right, I'm gonna let you go on to your number 7.
So ironically, and this is actually number 8.
Like I said, number 8.
Number 8. That's right. Ironically, actually, my number 8 takes the same path as yours. It's a sequel that I believe is a lot better than the original. And again, this list being underappreciated horror movies, it's going to be a little controversial because the first movie is seen as a classic by pretty much everybody. I'm going number 8 at Sleepaway Camp 2.
What's down there? Answer me. Shit. That's right. One of your favorite words. Well, if you mind if I borrow it for a moment? You've been a shitty friend and a shitty camper.
Sleepaway Camp 2.
I love slasher movies, as we have made clear. It's my favorite genre by far, and I will watch pretty much any one of them. But Sleepaway Camp, as classic as it is, everybody sleeps on the sequels. It's going to be unpopular, but Sleepaway Camp 2 is better than Sleepaway Camp. Hell, Sleepaway Camp 3 is quite possibly better than Sleepaway Camp. The original movie's weird, off-putting, incredibly offensive to the modern generation, and honestly, without Felissa Rose and her outstanding performance as the mute little weird girl, and the last 30 seconds of the movie, nobody would give a shit at all. But Sleepaway Camp 2 is gory, goofy, and it's completely hilarious. The kills are better. It's criminally underrated.
Yeah, Sleepaway Camp 2 is actually, it's not a bad film. I mean, it's, you know, and I totally get where you're coming from in terms of that. It's like, because I feel like it gets bogged down in that time. I mean, the film was in like 1988, right? And it gets bogged in that time where like the sequels to certain classic horror movies, and not saying that Sleepaway Camp was a classic horror movie, but like where the sequels were just being pumped out. It's towards that end of the 80s when it's just like, now you're on to like Halloween 4 or Nightmare on Elm Street 4 or, you know, Friday the 13th 5, and then Sleepaway Camp 2 comes along around that same time. It gets bogged down in that, kind of. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that's the thing is I had seen Sleepaway Camp, you know, a dozen times or so, and I just watched Sleepaway Camp 2 like 2 years ago, last year or something like that, because it's one of those movies that I was like, Sleepaway Camp was okay, like I get the ending, the iconic cult classic ending and all that stuff, great, you know, I've seen it a few times, great, but Sleepaway Camp 2, I just never really cared, because if I'm going to watch a sequel, I'm going to watch one of the Halloween movies. But watching Sleepaway Camp 2, like, it is completely tongue-in-cheek. It's actually a little meta. It deals with things in a different way than you would have expected, because Sleepaway Camp, as ridiculous as it is at times, and as corny and cheesy as it is, it handles itself completely seriously. It takes itself seriously, and Sleepaway Camp 2 does not at all. It's the complete polar opposite of the first movie, and it recognizes how completely ridiculous the slasher genre, especially in that time period, was, and it handles it in just a tongue-in-cheek, self-aware, hilarious way. I highly recommended it, and I guarantee you some of the people listening to this haven't watched it.
Definitely, for the 4 people that are out there.
Never know, man. We might get 5 this week.
We might get 5. This episode of Scare Bears Podcast brought to you by the number 5. Don't sue us, Sesame Street.
Especially not with my count laugh.
Yeah. You know, actually, the next one on my list, I was trying to debate about whether the original or the sequel, because I do like the sequel, although I do admit the hatred for the sequel. Like, I totally get where people are coming from in there, so I just went with the original as well, because a lot of people haven't heard of this movie either. But yeah, my number 8 is actually a movie called Grave Encounters.
Oh,
Death awaits. I guess we'll find out.
That is so lame.
I love Grave Encounters because it picks up on the whole genre of those ghost hunting shows, but like ghost hunting shows of like people that were trying to take it seriously and stuff like that. And then what would happen if you actually got trapped in a real haunted insane asylum? And the way that they did the spirits on the camera, I thought was too. It harkens back a little to the remake of House on Haunted Hill, but I don't know. I just kind of liked Grave Encounters. I thought that there were some really decently good shot scenes in that movie and some decently good scares for what it was. And then just to watch everybody that's in the movie slowly go more and more mad over time while in the setting of being in an abandoned insane asylum, which is kind of cool.
100% agree. It's a fantastic movie. I think it's something that a lot of people weren't really interested in large part because they just don't want found footage, and people give found footage way harder of a time than it deserves. But that's a fantastic one. It really, really is. Grave Encounters, it's decently scary. It's really well done. And as someone who personally hates all of those ghost hunter shows, it's excellent. I actually have it. I did a top 10 found footage list on the website, and it made number 8.
What did you, well, I mean, since we're talking about it, what did you think of this? Did you ever see the sequel?
I did see the sequel. It's definitely not as good, but it's still decent. I mean, it's decent. Yeah. It's not as bad as most found footage movies are, but the second one was decent too. The first one is a lot better in my opinion, but it's decent.
I just have to agree, especially since, you know, I'm the one that put it on my...
Fair enough. I'll take it.
How about 7 for you? Now that we're at 7.
Now we're at 7. All right. Number 7 for me.
Too busy watching GIFs. I can't count.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Number 7 for me is one that I think a lot of people haven't heard of. It's gotten a little bit of a cult following lately. My next one does too. But number 7, I've got Lake Mungo.
The autopsy was performed on the Monday, the 27th. Then the coroner released the body on the Tuesday, the 28th.
Oh, Lake Mungo.
I tried to make a list that was a mix, as I said, between underseen and undervalued, and I really think Lake Mungo is a little bit of both. It's a weird movie because it doesn't follow any traditional genre to the letter. It's kind of a mix of found footage and mockumentary. Both of those are done to absolute perfection. It's got a phenomenal twist near the end. It's scary, it's heartbreaking at the same time. It's a movie that just begs you to rewatch it a few times just to pick up on all the stuff that you missed the first time. It's a mix of genres that's incredibly hard to get right, and I think it definitely does it. It's certainly kind of a cult classic at this point. A lot of people recommend it, but it's always a, hey, have you heard of this movie? You should watch it. Most of the people who have seen it can't wait to go tell everybody how underrated it is, and they're absolutely right.
I completely agree. It is a good movie. To give everybody an idea, two things to Rev's credit here. After I made my list, I actually went back and I kind of Googled, most underrated horror movies or, things like that to see if, some of the ones that were on there on my list were even on those, or if there were movies that I had considered underrated but were actually, for lack of a better term, rated. Lake Mungo was actually like number one on a lot of other people's lists as well as being an underrated, overlooked horror movie. And honestly, absolutely correct. 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, right there from 22 reviewers. It is a great movie that if you have not seen it, definitely sits down and deserves a watch.
And you said 22 reviewers. That's a perfect, like you said, that's low. Those are rookie numbers. You got to pump that shit up.
Yeah. 2,500 audience ratings, but again, 2,500 is nothing on Rotten Tomatoes. As we established, our baseline is 100,000 for Nightmare on Elm Street the remake, which was
hot garbage.
It was a movie. It was a movie that exists in the world.
That's exactly right. And I think too, part of the Lake Mungo issue is it's got that whole, I'm not sure if it's Australian or New Zealand-ish. I don't know. Kiwi, I guess. I don't know what you call things from New Zealand, but I'm not sure if it's
you nailed it.
Yeah, Kiwis. I don't know if it is Australian or Kiwi, but I think that has a lot to do with why people ignored it. One of the other movies I was debating between two lake movies to put at number 7. I ended up settling with Lake Mungo, but my other choice was going to be Eden Lake, which is also fantastic, but is British. So I think a lot of times when you have those more indie style foreign movies, they just don't do well in America as far as entering the cultural zeitgeist piece of it. And it really should, because we're not the only country that makes movies.
We're not?
No.
Yeah, definitely. Like Mungo, totally worth a watch. And I agree with Rev in terms of when you do watch it, you're going to be one of those people that is going to be like, I need everybody else to now watch this.
Absolutely.
That is actually more of an overlooked horror movie than my number 7. My number 7, I think, hit about 50,000 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, which, that's probably the highest one. I think that it's totally overlooked, and I think that it's totally underrated, especially for who did it. And that is Red State.
Hear ye! His sacred call on! The heavenly trumpet sound his name! The one true God comes to rapture his faith, slay the wicked, and send this evil world straight to hell.
Oh, God, that's a good one.
I love Red State. I think that, well, first of all, I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith. And I know that some people have developed problems with him over the years, but I just really don't care. Those people are wrong.
Nah, fuck that.
Exactly. Kevin Smith is amazing. He's an amazing writer. I'm not going to throw him on any top 10 directors list, but I will throw him on one of the top 10 writers of movies any day of the week. But the fact that he can write that Michael Parks monologue, and Michael Parks delivers it so well. Oh man, as like the Westboro Baptist preacher up at the beginning of the thing. I think that movie is excellent. I think it has great beats. I think it follows a lot of horror movie tropes. I think that there's underappreciated things in that movie and the storylines that are going on and behind it. I think that even if you take out some of the stuff, when the kids are running out of the house and even the government shoots them not knowing whether they're not part of the church or not, it's almost like the government or your rescuers are turning on you as well. And what do you do in that situation when the people that are there to save you also turn on you because they can't go? I think that element adds something to it. I very much enjoy Red State. And I think because of the way that it was released, because it wasn't released in theaters and it was released on Netflix, which we will talk about in a second. But I think that was a very, I think it's just a great movie and very underappreciated.
You said it wasn't released in theaters?
No, because when they sold it, the rights to the movie at Sundance, then Scott Mosier, the producer of the film, ended up buying the rights to the movie, and then they released it on Netflix. It was released on Netflix thing for like 30. I think they made a deal with Netflix for 30 mil.
Yeah, so it's actually, and it's a little bit different than that. I was actually huge into Smodcast at the time. I'm also a fucking huge Kevin Smith fan.
Mm-hmm.
Love Kevin Smith, and I'm actually a little bit irritated because I didn't think to include Red State, and it absolutely belongs on a list like this. Red State is outstanding. Michael Parks 100% deserved an Oscar nomination for that role. And I tell you, John Goodman is outstanding in that movie. So good. Melissa Leo, who later won an Oscar, I believe actually the same year Red State came out. Red State was actually one that they did release in theaters, but it was extremely limited because they went on like a Red State tour where they would do a Q&A before and after the, or I guess maybe probably just after the movie. And it was like limited, like 60-person theaters and stuff like that. And the actual Westboro Baptist followed them on tour and were picketing outside every single time. It's a really cool, like, from the ground up indie story where like people funded this movie. And it is to me, Red State and Kevin Smith in general, but Red State especially, is the definition of an indie movie with just some incredible filmmakers behind it. Man, like I said, I'm kind of pissed that's a great fucking addition to this list.
Yeah, definitely. If you haven't seen Red State, I would totally get on that after watching some of the other ones that you haven't seen that have already been mentioned. And then I would highly recommend what Rev was talking about in terms of the story of the way that movie was produced, the way that it was made, the deals that they made, and his reasoning behind it, the reasoning behind why he did what he did in terms of not releasing the movie in theaters and relying on these, $100 million marketing budgets in order to do it, but just making the deal with Netflix is really just a testament to how powerful streaming services are.
Absolutely.
As carriers of that thing. And like I said, I do want to get into that conversation a little bit later because there's a couple movies coming up that we kind of talk about the streaming force, the streaming, what am I trying to say, impact in terms of how movies are released today. And then, because they're released on streaming services or exclusively for streaming services, especially Shudder, which if you don't know, or if you guys have been living under a rock, Shudder is a streaming service specifically for horror movies. And I have to say that Shudder has completely up their game in the last 2 years. It's like they took their subscription model and then they're just like, listen, we're going to produce original content. And some of the movies that they have produced have been phenomenal, really giving voice to really independent horror filmmakers. If you've not tried Shudder, it is like, if you're wondering whether or not signing up for Shudder is worth it, it is 100% completely worth it.
And I believe they usually offer a free 30-day trial too. So you can download the Shudder app or you can go to shudder.com and give it a shot for 30 days. It's great.
We are not in any way sponsored by Shudder. However,
again,
we would like to be.
Shudder whores. I will change the podcast name to Shudder Whores if you give us enough money. It's got to be a lot because I do like the Scare Bears, but
I definitely see a lot of gifts from films on Shudders. Let's move on to your number 6.
Number 6, I have Session 9.
Billy, I need to talk to Simon. Billy, wait up, Simon. Billy.
No!
Session 9.
The only reason this isn't higher on my list is that it's also kind of become a cult classic and a lot of people have seen it now. If you're looking at, as Ken said, if you're looking at lists online of most underrated, you'll see this one very close to the top. It is creepy as hell. It's incredibly well done and it's got enough of the indie flair to make it a little bit different than most of the horror movies that you've seen before. It's excellent psychological horror. The use of the abandoned Danvers State Mental Hospital in Massachusetts makes the scenery just as creepy as the rest of the movie. Plus, it's got David Caruso, and who doesn't love David Caruso? Mm-hmm. I actually don't love David Caruso, but he's great in Session 9.
Yeah, Session 9 is a really interesting film. It's one of those that I think that it's like one of those like love it or hate it type things where it's just like, I think that you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, I really like that movie, or you watch it and you're just like, why did somebody recommend it? It's actually very middle of the road like that. I happen to agree with you. I think that it's a great movie, although I do really wish that like David Caruso, and I do believe that this was pre-CSI Miami days, would just look at the camera and like just say one of those one-liners like, looks like we got some ghost tapes, something like that.
Oh, I think he does that. That's just in the deleted scenes.
Just David
Just
Cruz's
take his
acting
sunglasses
style.
off. No, that whole "I live in the weak and the wounded" thing is like constantly in my head. It's a good movie.
Session 9, again, couldn't recommend it more. Just to say that you have seen it.
And if you watch any of these movies and hate them, feel free to leave a comment. Again, we don't care if you agree. Just listen.
That's right. Get in the comments, people. Get in the comments. I think that actually is vastly different than mine. My number 6 is a movie called P2.
Angela, wait, I didn't...
Merry Christmas, Thomas.
I love P2. It is one of the few Christmas horror movies that have been made. I especially love when they do horror movies during Christmas time because I happen to love Halloween. And because I love Halloween, I almost have an abject disdain for Christmas because Christmas encroaches on my holiday every year. And it fills me sometimes with an unrighteous rage to the point of burning with a passion of 1,000 fiery suns, seeing Christmas decorations during Halloween time or the month of October in stores. So any horror movie that takes place during Christmas, I especially tend to like. Better Watch Out, Santa Sleigh, or Silent Night, Deadly Night are great examples of these. But P2, great movie. Wouldn't say it's the best movie, but it is a good watch. It's a fun watch to watch, just that kind of claustrophobic feel of trying to run away from somebody stalking you in a parking garage, and then him controlling, parking garage itself, so he kind of always knows what's going on there. So, but yeah, I would definitely say P2 is mine.
Yeah, don't undersell yourself, man. P2 is pretty good. I actually had not seen it until I think 2 years ago because I do a 13 Days of Christmas every year for the website, and I reviewed it. I had no idea it was a Christmas movie. It was one of those movies I'd seen on Netflix for years and just kind of passed it by. I think the poster art has her like leaning up against one of the cinder block towers in the parking garage with an axe, and it just looked stereotypical slasher movie, whatever. And it's really not. It's really good. It's a pretty cool cat and mouse kind of psychological horror slasher, I guess. I mean, it's not so much in the high body count, but you're right. I mean, putting yourself in that situation where you're in a confined space, but the person that you're in there with controls every single piece of it. It's a really interesting idea, and it's really well done. And it's a great Christmas horror movie. So if you're looking for a movie to watch this December, that's a good one to choose.
I completely agree. All right, but enough about that. What's your number 5?
Number 5. So we are halfway through.
Halfway through.
This is one. So it's not one that I think a lot of people really paid attention to because it was a relatively big budget, not like super big budget. It wasn't like a grade A movie, but it is one. It got the theater release. It got a lot of press, or a lot of advertising, I should say, and just kind of flew under everybody's radar. Number 5, I have The Ruins.
I'll break the bones first with the stone, then use the knife to cut through. We're heating the pan to cauterize the wounds to stop the bleeding. You're not going to be able to feel a thing.
I loved the book. I read the book first, and it just resonated with me. I'm a sucker for like tourist horror movies where people go on vacation and they end up like in their worst nightmare. And The Ruins is such a weird, like nature run amok horror, but it's also like, it's not supernatural, but the way that the wildlife and the plants behave gives it kind of like this weird, like trapped feeling that works really, really well. I mean, being stuck in a clearing in the jungle with nature itself trying to keep you inside, that's pretty messed up. Like I said, the book is fantastic. I definitely recommend reading that and watching the movie. The book is better, of course, because the book's always better, but there's just something about all of the natural world trying to kill you that is like uber creepy and really appealing to me. And it actually has Joe Anderson, who you mentioned, throwback to the last episode. He is in that movie as well.
It does have Joe Anderson. That's exactly what I was going to say about that movie. And that right there is the reason to watch it, because Joe Anderson is amazing.
I don't even know who Joe Anderson is. You just mentioned him last time, and I IMDb'd him. I was like, oh, he's in The Ruins. I want to talk about that next week.
He's actually going to pop up on my list a little later.
Number 1 is The Ruins.
Yeah, number 1. No, it is a good movie. It's fun. You're definitely right. It's in that vein of what happens when vacations go awry, like Lost Teresa's and things like that. But good choice.
Thank you. I know.
Totally good choice. Also, props for including a Joe Anderson film.
Yeah, whoever the hell that guy is.
Oh my God. you just gotta appreciate Joe Anderson a little bit more. I think actually, speaking of overlooked and underrated things, everybody should take a moment and appreciate Joe Anderson just a little bit more.
Joe Anderson Day. We'll make it like July
Scare Bears
6th.
Podcast brought to you by Joe Anderson Day. I am lobbying for it. I shouldn't say we, you're right. I am lobbying for a complete day just dedicated to people watching movies with Joe Anderson.
And I will lobby for it in the same way that I sign petitions outside of like Whole Foods. I don't fucking care what you're selling. Just get away from me. If you want me to sign something, I will.
Nice. Scare Bears Podcast brought to you by signing petitions when you just don't know what you're putting your name to.
Well, and you can't just say no. Somebody walks up to you and they're like, hey, sign this. We're saving sick children. Like, as long as it doesn't cost me any money to sign the petition, I guess I'll sign it.
Number 5 on my list is The Collector.
He's coming.
He's supposed to come down the stairs, okay?
He's coming free.
Ooh.
If you guys haven't seen The Collector, I highly, highly recommend this movie. It is I believe, just one of those movies where you just haven't really heard about it. I'm sure one of your friends maybe recommended it to you, and they're just like, oh, you should really see this movie, but you haven't gotten around to watching it. It is a phenomenal movie that I think is vastly underrated. I looked it up on IMDb. 29% out of 77 reviews of professional reviews gave it a 29%, and I have to disagree with every single one of them. I think The Collector is a phenomenal movie. A lot of people think that I love the internet theory that Kevin McAllister from Home Alone was then Jigsaw later in life, but I happen to think that Kevin McAllister is The Collector.
Yeah, it fits a lot better with The Collector. I agree.
It fits a lot better. And The Collector, and then they did do The Collection. That one you're probably going to want to watch because you watched The Collector, although you could probably that's up to you. But I couldn't recommend The Collector enough when somebody says oh hey, is there a horror movie that I would really like? I'm just like, yeah, you should totally check out The Collector.
I agree with you. That's a great one. I actually like the sequel too. And I'll tell you, and this isn't an honorable mention, so don't count this against me on my list, but I always get The Collector and The Collection mixed up with Laid to Rest, which is another really, really good one with the same kind of feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
They're both series are extremely gory, and it's a lot of fun. Now, allegedly, they are not in production, but in the works of making The Collected a third movie in the series. So
we'll definitely be checking that out when it comes out. The only reason why I said that The Collection was a movie that you're either going to like or not like is because they turned to me. The Collector was the guy that sets up these elaborate traps in his house and catches people in order to add them to part of his collection. In The Collection, they tried to go bigger and grander, but for some strange reason, The Collector became this Krav Maga ass-kicking ninja, and it was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting choice that you took for the character itself. It's like you could have had this character of just that could have been up there with some iconic horror movie characters. Not saying that he isn't, but and then you gave him these ridiculous man fighting abilities where he's expertly head punching and taking down teams of FBI agents, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't know that we needed to go in that direction. That's kind of where it kind of fell for me.
Dude, you don't fucking know him. He may be Krav Maga. You don't know.
That's what, you're absolutely right.
You don't know what he does in his spare time.
When he puts a family in the basement, when he takes over a house and he puts a family in the basement, maybe he's just hitting the bag down there.
He's upstairs doing yoga and shit.
He only targets houses with punching bags in them, which is another reason why working out bad for your health.
That's exactly right. I will co-sign that. Agreed.
All right, where are you going for 4?
All right, so number 4, I have to say with this, I would love to make this my number 1 movie just because I do think that it is extremely underrated when it shouldn't be, but I just think the 3 above it are better movies. Number 4 is Zombievers.
My friend told me I can't shit in this house anymore.
Oh, isn't that the worst?
You believe that?
Yeah, they get all mad because you blew out their bathroom. It's a place to shit. That's what the room is built for. You're supposed to go in there and take a shit, and then when you do it, they act like they're surprised, like you took a dump on their table or something.
Yeah, I know. I did take a dump on his table.
Going way back to episode 1, I think this is one of the first movies that we mentioned. I will preach this movie to anyone who will listen. I fucking love Zombievers. It's a movie that knows exactly what it is. It never does anything but lean into the ridiculousness, and it is so much better than it has any right to be. It's fun. It's hilarious. It's a fantastic watch-along movie if you like to get your friends together and watch movies together. It's a fantastic example of a horror comedy, and I feel like most people don't don't give it a chance because they thought it was going to be stupid. To be fair, it absolutely is stupid, but in the best way possible. The effects are just fucking laugh out loud amazing. They're outstanding and incredibly well done. People, watch Zombievers and do not make me tell you again.
There's nothing I can say against this movie. Zombievers is amazing.
It is. It's a movie but I remember when I first watched it, I watched it, I think I was at work, and it was just one of those like super slow nights, and I was like, fuck, I gotta find something. It's like, Zombievers, this looks stupid. And I put it on and I was like, oh my god, this movie is fucking amazing. Like, because, we've talked before, I'm a big fan of trauma movies and like those like 80s, like not even tongue-in-cheek, but really over-the-top horror comedy movies that you can tell like the writers are comedy first, but Zombievers leans really heavy into the horror too, unlike a lot of the horror comedies, because a lot of them, I think you had mentioned it in the first episode that we did about how you think it's probably like a 65-35-ish blend between comedy
60-40
and
split,
60-40, yeah. So this one is almost dead on 50-50, and both of them are handled so well. It's just it's hilarious, but it's also super gory and like gross, and it's fantastic. And I actually have an interview with one of the stars, Courtney Palm, up on my website right now.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. And what website is that?
That is thehorrorrevolution.com, which I'll be plugging again near the end. If you go for it and look for the secret code, you can listen to our podcast for free.
Ooh, like that. Would you say there are any gifts on your site?
Gifts? No, I don't put any gifts on there. Only because I don't know how. I am not a web developer, but I think it looks pretty good. I think we did a good job with it.
It does. I have to say, it's a pretty fascinating site. I mean, because you not only have the interviews that you have, but also you have guest writers and things like that, and you go back and forth with them. It's very cool.
Thank you.
Now, I will say this about Zombievers, a huge disparity between the critic score and the audience score, but almost in that way of what you wouldn't expect it. The critics love this movie.
Really?
It's 70%. 70% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Holy cow.
That is marked over the threshold, 32% for audience. So it's like what you were saying in terms of that 60-40, I think that it does hit those notes. I feel like the 50-50, it goes in there knowing we're going to make this movie, but we're going to lean in every single direction, and we're going to lean into it. And it's just, it's awesome.
I feel like the people who don't like this movie think that it's going to be a documentary when they start watching it, and then it takes a turn, and they're like, "Oh no, this isn't a document. This isn't PBS. Like, what the hell is going on?" Because how can you watch this movie? How can you go into a movie? How can you actually sit there in front of your television and turn on a movie called Zombievers and then get what you get with this movie and be like, "Oh, it isn't what I expected." Like, what are you doing? Like,
that's true.
You don't watch this and going like, you know what? I don't care what anybody says. I don't think Zombievers is going to get an Academy Award this year. Yeah, fucking obviously. It's called Zombievers. Like, what part of this made you think that this was Silence of the Lambs?
It's definitely a great movie.
It is a great movie. I'll shut up about Zombievers, but I'm never going to shut up about Zombievers.
Well, that actually, you know what? I would say the Zombievers is it better? Yeah, it's better than my number 4. Because Zombievers didn't make the list. I'm a little upset that I didn't put Zombievers on my
That's
list.
all right. I think Red State's better than Zombievers, so 1-1.
I don't know. It depends. It's like one of those moods like you're sitting there for. It's just like Zombievers hits when you're like, oh man, I want to watch a really just stupidly awesome, but just funny but good horror movie. And then, or do I want to watch like a serious, just classically made horror movie? So
do I want genetically modified like lake creatures, or do I feel more like Christian fundamentalists?
Yes, exactly. But number 4 on mine is a movie called Would You Rather.
What exactly is the game?
Well, it is not a quiz or a trivia contest, nor is it a test of brute strength or athleticism. At its core, it's just a children's game, and I would wager that some of you here this evening have played Would You Rather?
Ooh, that's a good one too.
Yeah, Would You Rather it came out during that time of like when torture porn, for lack of a better term, was really popular, around that Saw mentality. Would You Rather is a movie with Brittany Snow. She, she's trapped at a party to win a lot of money. It's just becomes a question of would you rather? Would you rather do this or this? And it just becomes increasingly more and more insane. It pulls on your heartstring, makes you question what would the lengths you go for family? What would be the lengths that you would go for if what you doing wasn't for selfish versus for someone else? And that, I think, is the different twist to it, because it's like you're doing these things and you know the horror and the pain that you're inflicting, but also what's the line? Road to hell is paved with good intentions, as some people say. Where would you end in that movie? I think that if you haven't seen Would You Rather, it gives you a philosophical kind of depth to those questions.
Yeah, I'm totally Sasha Grey in that movie, man. Like, you're going to trap me in a room and tell me I can't leave and I've got to play? Nah, fuck that, man. I'm doing whatever the hell I need to do. No question. Although I will say, funny anecdote about Would You Rather. I love Would You Rather. I'm a little bit jealous. That one absolutely belongs on this list. Just because it's so underseen. Like, it was one of those kind of like straight to Netflix indie type movies. And I think a lot of people ignored it. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people watched it that were originally Pitch Perfect fans, which is fine because it's fantastic. I will say, watching Would You Rather with my wife, she was like, yeah, I kind of like that like dark-haired girl. What else is she in? I was like, a lot of stuff you haven't seen. Sasha Grey is a porn star, just for anyone watching this or listening to this who isn't aware. And she's okay in the movie.
She's done a lot of independent movies. She's done
a lot of those like guy holding a camera indie movies, like that's her bread and butter.
So yeah, Would You Rather, if you haven't seen it, would just recommend it just because of those existential questions. It really is just one of those movies that makes you forced to kind of think about things. Moving on, Rev, hit me with your number.
Yes, I will. But first, I do want to say also that ending, holy fuck, man.
Oh yeah,
that ending's right in the damn soul.
It hits you. Oh god, it's like a horror movie that makes you feel it feels.
Oh, so good.
It reminds me that I do have a heart. Sometimes I forget.
I'm with you, man. All right, so number 3. I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of your Grave Encounters, and my number 3 is Hell House LLC.
Holy fuck. Got me, man. All right, weirdo. Let me know when you want to get back to work down there.
Ooh, Hell House.
You know what? I'm going to soapbox for a minute. Found footage is fucking awesome. If you don't like found footage, you're wrong. Sure, not all of them are great, but that can be said about literally any subgenre. And sure, it is a crutch for a lot of low-budget people that perhaps shouldn't be making movies in the first place. But when it hits, it fucking hits. And Hell House is so fucking scary. It's incredibly well done. It's genuinely terrifying. And it's a fantastic idea for a movie in general, like making this haunted house in this old abandoned mansion, or hotel, I should say. Certainly there is a little bit of iffiness on some of the sequels as far as story goes, but they're honestly watchable and entertaining as well. There have been so many movies with almost exactly the same kind of plot that just completely fail, and to me, Hell House knocked it out of the park. Those clowns fucking scared the shit out of me.
I think that everything that you said about found footage films is true, because I happen to like a lot of them, as you know. Blair Witch Project was number 2 on my personal favorites. A couple of other, found footage movies that I love. But yeah, Hell House, I think you found it, man. I mean, this, looked it up just real quick, only 500 ratings. So it didn't even crack 1,000 in audience ratings on Rotten.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So apparently of just a vastly underappreciated, just, good movie. Would have to agree with everything that you said about Hell House. Taking that found footage and then trying to do like an investigative but also documentary style. So it's not really found footage because it's not like you found the cameras, but also like, oh, here's a documentary crew filmmaking that turned into this nightmare. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of good things to say about Hell House LLC.
Well, and it is available on Shudder now. Second mention of Shudder today. That means you guys owe us twice. But it is on Shudder now. I think for a long time, the only way that you could watch it is if you owned one of the extremely hard to find copies or if you rented it off of Amazon. And I think that's the thing about movies that go straight to Amazon is a lot of times they're really good. And as much as I have a hard time shilling for Amazon in any way, what I will say is I know that they treat their indie horror people pretty well. And I know that, when you pay to rent a movie like that, a lot of that money is going into those people's pockets. But the flip side of that is if you don't know about the movie, movie, you're not going to look it up. You're going to have a lot of people having watched it so that it's going to like go into the recommended list for Amazon and get in that algorithm for you to even have heard of some of these movies. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's so low. Hopefully now that it's on Shudder, and I believe they have all 3 plus the prequel that they just released, hopefully with it being on Shudder now, hopefully a lot more people will watch it.
Also, yes, Shudder executives, we will also whore ourselves out for just free subscription.
Yeah,
it doesn't even have to be, any monetary value. It could just be like, listen, here's your free month for mentioning us multiple times on your podcast.
Absolutely. And you know what? Honestly, Shudder, we love you to death. Screambox, doors wide open, man. Balls in your court. We don't care.
My number 3 film is a film called The Carriers.
Brian,
help me out, will you?
we need to talk.
The key to the pump has to be here somewhere.
Brian, we need to deal with it.
Who's that key?
Or Carriers. It is an interesting movie because it is kind of almost a zombie movie, but it's not, because it's a movie about it's real life, and it's about like a virus, but not a zombie virus. So when you get this virus, you're still alive. You still have to go through just being sick and dead, but also trying to hide from other people in terms of whether or not that you have it, the protection protocols in order to do it, what existing living in this apocalyptic world would look like, taking care of your family, trying to watch out for each other, what happens when those things happen. I like Carriers a lot, and I feel like a lot of people haven't seen this movie or haven't heard about it. When people talk about like, what movie, what do you think I should watch that goes a little bit horror, a little bit of a thriller and stuff like that, I'm like, you should check out Carriers.
So it's basically 2020 the movie?
Yes, it's basically 2020 the movie, but it came out in 2009, so prophetic.
Ooh.
Almost. But no, it's definitely, it's not the most gruesome movie in the world. It's not the most, horrific movie in the world. It again addresses that notion of how we would treat each other when these situations are coming arise. But also, it is also PG-13. I will say that as well. But it does element into that horror suspense, that kind of thriller category. But it is a fine movie. Chris Pine is in it, if that does anything for you.
And if that doesn't
Captain
do
Kirk
anything
himself.
for you, Lieutenant Stabler is in it.
Yes.
I actually have not seen Carriers. I'm gonna have to add that to my list.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie. It's I think that one of those things that, again, when somebody's just like, I'm like, just, oh, did you see Carriers? Or just like, never even heard of them.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. So it's definitely something that I'm going to have to watch.
Yeah, and if Stephen King does anything for you, I actually learned about Carriers from a Stephen King article that appeared in Entertainment Weekly when he was talking about Stephen King's like top choices. He used to write one of the front articles for Entertainment Weekly, the magazine. For those of you who are younger than us, magazines were a thing that had kind of shiny, glossy pages with big picture spreads and articles that you would read holding it in your hand. You actually had to flip through the magazine in order to actually read and learn information.
Oh, big man knows how to read. Okay, nerd.
But yeah, Stephen King wrote about it. I was just like, I should really check that out. I checked it out, and I loved it. So if that does anything for you too, if not Chris Pine, Stephen King
and Lieutenant Stabler.
There you go.
I miss magazines, man. I miss being able to go and like look at cool shit while your mom was checking out at the grocery store. Like being like, no, get me. It's Bad Boys in this one. Get it for me.
Scare Bears podcast brought to you by things that went out of style 10 years ago.
Things that no longer exist. Next episode is the British East India Company.
Yes, it's about yes. We're getting up there. What's your number 2?
My number 2, and this one. So I have a little bit of a personal connection with this one as well, and it's incredibly hard to find. You can't even get it on Amazon at this point. I don't really know why, but I would like some answers. It used to be on Shudder. My number 2 is the WNUF Halloween special.
Tired of all those commercials when all you want to do is rock out? Well, wait no more. With Feel the Steel, Board and Wax brings you all your favorite hits.
I am a huge fan of Chris LaMartina and his wife Melissa. I've met them both. They are wonderful people, and they are the absolute essence of indie horror. WNUF is funny when it needs to be. It's perfectly done nostalgia for anyone who experienced those local channels in the 80s. It's a flawlessly unique movie, and it's one of the most unique movies I've ever seen. It's actually very similar to Ghost Watch, which is on Shudder right now. It's just a lot less British, and a lot of people are experiencing Ghost Watch for the first time now because it was a movie that was really, really hard to find for a long time, and WNUF is the same way now. I will say that you can get WNUF from TerrorVision, which is a physical media company out of Savannah, Georgia, and honestly, y'all don't even need to pay me. I fucking love you. I'm a huge supporter of physical media, and TerrorVision is one of my favorite companies. It's also was available, I don't believe it still is, on Vinegar Syndrome, and TerrorVision also, I think, has the sequel, which is called like the Far Out Halloween Mega Tape or something like that, which is also phenomenal. Both movies are great. WNUF is more 80s local access TV. The sequel is more like 90s, dealing with like stupid talk shows, and like when the talk show people would go and try to do news stuff, like when Geraldo tried to find Al Capone's grave. Like it's super like on the pulse of pop culture in those eras. And like I said, most people haven't seen it. It's incredibly hard to find. If you get the chance, WNUF Halloween Special hits you right in those nostalgia feels.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I've heard of WNUF. I've never seen.
Oh, it's so good.
So talk about, overlooked.
I mean, even down to like between the segments of it. So the story is, and I'll just give you an overview. The story is basically it's this local television special, a Halloween special, and it's got the local newscasters who go to this house, this allegedly haunted house, and they try to do a seance in the haunted house to find whoever's there. It's it's a pretty typical story, but the brilliance of the movie is that between segments, it will cut to these commercials that they created for the movie, but they're not like funny. It's not like tongue in cheek. It's like the commercials you'd see in the 80s. Come to Bob's Yarn Barn on Highway whatever. We've got all this, and it's got like the little kits that they sold where you can saw the eyes out of pumpkins and all that shit. Like it is a perfect Halloween movie, and it is a goddamn shame that you can't find it. And I sincerely hope that everyone listening to this, if you don't want to give us money, go give them money. Go to TerrorVision, order this movie, and watch it. You need to see it.
Yeah, definitely gonna have to check this one out. I'm adding it to the list right now.
I definitely recommend you do. I think the first time I watched it, I rented it on Amazon, and it got a lot of buzz a few years ago. And I don't really know how. I guess just grassroots marketing. But like I said, I will do. Chris LaMartina and his wife, they did. It's called like What Happens Next Will Scare You, which was a little uneven, but it was a really interesting take on like viral videos and stuff like that. They also he did one called Girl of Cthulhu, which I think you can find on Tubi. I'm a big fan of them. They're brilliant, both of them. Melissa, his wife, who is like his muse, I guess you could say, she also hosts a local Baltimore horror show as Aurora Borealis, and she's amazing. They're both fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a really good one. Yeah, so Jeff Bezos, you still have a lot to answer for. You had a lot to answer for in the first episode. We're episode 3. You still got stuff to answer for, all right?
And you know what? We're not even going to dig into the human rights issues. Just give us the fucking movies we want. We'll leave you alone.
Exactly. Which leads me into my number 2, speaking of crazy people, because my number 2 movie is called The Crazy.
People only ask for a reward when there's something to find.
Is it going to be a big reward, Sheriff?
Travis, you ask about that again, I'm going to throw you out of the boat.
Ooh. This is a movie that came out. It's got Timothy Olyphant, and it's got one Joe Anderson.
No way.
But it is a great movie. Very, just one of those, like, it's like Planet Terror, but without the grindhouse. It goes into, like, what happens when, like a peaceful town and a sheriff in a small town and the police force, with just 2 cops. What happens when those people in the town just turn into crazy lunatics and are just so consumed with rage that they just start killing each other. And then you got to figure out not only what's causing it, but also kind of deal with the people that are coming in to try to clean it up. And you're in that eternal struggle of trying to survive. I think that this movie is totally amazing. And if you have not seen The Crazies, I couldn't recommend it enough.
Yeah, and if anybody can't tell, Ken would much rather be doing this podcast with Joe Anderson.
I would much rather be doing a lot with Joe Anderson.
We're not going to touch that. We're going to move on.
Joe Anderson, if you're listening and you ever were to come into my house and just kind of snap your fingers and say, Ken, it's time, I would go. No arguments for me.
Joe Anderson sex cult.
There it is. Done and done.
Done and
Done
done.
and done.
No, so have you seen the original?
Think I've seen the original.
The original's Romero.
Mm.
It's the 70s, I believe.
73.
Yeah, and the original one is a lot more. It's a lot less slick. You know, the new one is a lot more Hollywood and like quote unquote overproduced. But I agree, The Crazies is fantastic, and Timothy Olyphant, who I always want to call Timothy Elephant, he's amazing in the movie. I mean, he's amazing in everything. But your same little Joe Anderson cult, I'll happily join one with him. He's great. It's a great movie. It's decently scary. 2021, the movie you could call that one. Just really, really good. Great movie. Great choice.
Yeah, and it's one of those that I'm surprised when I'm just like, oh yeah, I saw The Crazies, and they're just like, people are just like, what is that? I've never even heard of that, and I'm just like, wow, for coming out in 2010 and then being an actual released to theater movie, just surprised the number of people that have not seen it or have not heard about it.
For real, that's crazy. That's crazies.
Before we get into our number ones, I wanted to give you some honorable mentions. I'll let you kick it off.
Honorable mentions. I've got 3 of them for you today, of varying qualities and purpose. The first one I'm going to mention is Last Shift.
Last Shift is...
It was the reason why I didn't include this, because I feel like way more people know about it. Way more people have seen it. It was on Netflix for a long time. I believe it still is, or Peacock, or one of those. And also because its remake, Malum, just came out last year, and it is a shot-for-shot remake by the same director. Not necessarily shot-for-shot. It's a remake by the same director who wanted to come at it with a larger budget and kind of do things the way that he had wanted to do them originally. Both of them are fantastic. It is super scary, super well done, and if you haven't seen either one of them, you should go see both of them. It's one of the very few remakes that is entirely worth it to watch both movies back to back and compare.
I know that you guys can't see this, but I'm just nodding my head along while Rev's talking about both those movies.
This is what he should be doing all the time, because I'm fucking amazing.
Yes, it's just nodding a head. Yep, that's correct. Yeah, Last Shift again. And I also didn't include it on my list because of the same reason that was probably on your list. It was just because I've talked to people and people have talked about that movie a little bit more than some of the other ones that I had on mine. But Last Shift is actually a really good movie. If you guys have not seen it. And then, yeah, Malum is also a good flick as well.
Yes, and again, I'm only, in my 3, I'm only including Last Shift because I did like the original better. My second honorable mention, and this one almost made the list, is Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2. The reason why this almost made the list is because it is creepy and absurd. It's fantastically ethereal. It's got some crazy artistic choices. It's also way better than the original. Prom Night kind of sucks despite Jamie Lee Curtis. Prom Night 2 is infinitely watchable. It's super fun, and the carousel horse scene is fucking super creepy.
I also have to admit, I don't think I've ever seen this movie either.
Oh man, it's not a good movie. It's not a good movie. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But it's so fucking creepy in some of its scenes, and they'll stick in your head. And I think that's something. And again, I think being the sequel to Prom Night, which Prom Night is really just kind of a stereotypical slasher movie, and again, boring.
Yeah, not even that good of a one.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. The only reason people care about it at all is because of Jamie Lee. But Prom Night 2 is this it's almost like a post-death Carrie type story about this girl, and again, don't quote me, I haven't seen it in a few years, but about this girl who basically comes back from the dead to seek vengeance on the people who killed her. Completely different from Prom Night. In my opinion, it's probably Prom Night 2 because they were like, hey, Prom Night 2's doing pretty well in the theaters. Let's make the movie we were gonna make and just jam the title in there, and people won't know the difference. I know the difference.
Yeah, you've sold it. You've made the sale, sir.
It's a terrible movie. Don't sit there watching it and be like, but he said this was going to be good. It's not good.
Oh no,
you
have to go in with exactly what you said. Your expectations have to be set to the expectations being set when watching a movie with a 6-word title.
With a 6-word title, and also just knowing that the creepiest scene in the movie is a batshit crazy, has nothing to do with anything else in the movie, scene where a rocking horse comes alive and seductively licks the actress. That's all you should need to know.
What's your third one?
My third one, and this one is right up there with Zombievers to me, although it is far more indie, and this is just one, I love this movie so much, is Velocipaster. Velocipaster is one of my favorite guilty pleasures because it is so damn funny. And I totally understand why most people haven't watched this movie. I get it. It should be terrible by all rights. It is absurd to the highest degree, but it is also so fucking hilarious. It's completely tongue-in-cheek, perhaps the best example of a self-aware movie that I've ever seen, and it has some of the most terrible, ridiculous, and utterly awesome special effects that I've ever seen. It is so damn funny. If you haven't seen Velocipaster, I believe it's on Tubi, go check it out. It is at the same time not at all what you expect and exactly what you expect.
It is such an amazing movie in just the style, what you would exactly think that a movie called Velocipaster would be as. It is just so genuinely awesome. I couldn't agree more with Velocipaster. It's right up there with movies like Toxic Shark or like those movies that are just amazing where you're like halfway through you're just like, why am I watching this? But damn, am I enjoying it so much.
It's almost like Toxic Shark made by Mel Brooks.
Yes. It is just it. Velocipaster is just deliciously bad, but it makes it so good.
But it knows it's bad, and that's the key.
It embraces it.
It knows it's bad. My understanding is that it was a student film. That it was either a student film or the guy that made a student film and then made this feature off of it. I'm not sure which one. And there is rumored to be a sequel in the works. God, I hope it happens because I love Velocipaster. But this is a movie that like you're not going to be able to put it on for the vast majority of movie watchers because they're going to be like, the fuck is this? Like how? But if you have the sense of humor that I have, and you have that appreciation for people that understand that they can't do what they want to do with a movie, so this is what they're going to do instead. Oh, so good. So damn good.
It is so damn good. Yeah, so my honorable mention you already talked about, which was Lake Mungo. So I'm kind of glad that you put it on your list because I was just like,
nice.
I kind of want to put this on there, but I moved some things around. I wanted to include some other films and talk about them. So, but like, yes, Lake Mungo was on my honorable mentions list. So
that's good. You only had one?
Yeah, another endorsement for Lake Mungo. Then your number one. What is the number one, in your opinion, overlooked, undervalued horror movie?
Number one. Oh, so you did it right. You did the like fade out there. That was better. I like that other than me just repeating one over and over again. All right, so my number one, this is a movie that I think a lot of people have seen the cover of and just didn't give the time that they should. My number one is Creep.
Hello, my name is Peach Fuzz. I might look like I eat you up, but I'm as friendly as a rabbit, and I'd make a very good friend.
Oh man, Creep is so damn good. It's an incredibly bizarre plot, and it's got some of the best indie acting of all time. And I'm not just talking horror, I'm talking about movies.
Are you talking about 2022 or 2014 with Mark Duplass?
2014 with Mark Duplass.
Cool. Just wanted to make that distinction for the audience because there was a Creep, the same title that was released about 2 years ago.
No, this is the, and I don't, is it Duplass? I don't know how you pronounce it, but
yeah, I think it's the Duplass brothers, but I could be wrong.
I either way, he's phenomenal. He is so damn good in this movie. And he's great anyway. I mean, he's a great actor in everything. He was excellent in The Morning Show. Really, really good. It's just a simplistic plot about a guy who hires a videographer because he wants to make a movie for his unborn son because he's dying. That's all you really need to know. Also, the fact this is the weirdest guy on the planet. It is creepy as fuck. I don't know how this movie is so underseen because it was on Netflix for years and years and years. It may still be, but it is criminally underrated. I've never heard anybody who's seen it say a bad word about it. It's also really, really scary and just like off-putting. The sequel also is excellent. It's almost as good, and depending on your perspective, maybe even better than the original. But both of these, honestly, they need to be seen by every single horror fan out there because they are incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love this movie. Creep is such a great movie, and I was actually introduced to Mark when he was on The League, the TV show on FX. Since it's such a comedy show, watching him in Creep just underappreciated in what he does. But yeah, Creep is such a deliciously creepy movie. It's just perfectly titled in that way.
It's perfectly titled. It's so damn creepy.
You know, because you're experiencing it through the filmmaker's eyes, but also the guy behind the camera, the way that he delivers his lines, and even the pauses that he makes before he delivers his lines would be the exact same way that if you were there experiencing what this guy was trying
100%.
to do, would do the same thing. Like you would almost do it the same way.
Man, and it's a difficult movie to explain because it's not out and out scary. It's not a movie. It's almost difficult to really call it a straight horror movie. But man, I can't think of a single time that I've ever watched a movie and I've just been so unsettled from beginning to end. It's just it was an almost completely unique feeling of watching this movie because I was just like, I almost wanted to turn it off because it just had my nerves like jittering and like fried the whole damn movie.
Yeah, it's
so well done.
It is a very good movie, and again brings up that conversation of just like the impact of streaming services. And I'm glad that you brought this one up because this movie was originally at South by Southwest, and then it went right to video on demand by an old streaming network called The Orchard, and then it went to Netflix in I want to say like 2015 or 2016, and that's when it got caught on after it was on Netflix. It's the idea that a lot of great and you can't even call them independent horror movies because they are now studio productions. Movie studios have turned into streaming platforms are now movie studio in that regard, where they can take these movies and produce them, put them on their platform, knowing that some of these movies are going to have to gain a following, gain an interest, but that people will sign up for them in order to do that. And it's very interesting that the model of making, and I think that one of the genres that has really benefited from is horror, because back in the day, a lot of studios wouldn't take a chance on dumping money into a horror movie because it's not just about the budget of what it takes to make a horror movie, right? As we know, when you were doing movies back about 15, 20 years ago, maybe even sometimes recently, we'll say 10 to 15 years ago, it wasn't just making a movie, it was the $100 million that you're going to have to also spend in marketing. So it's not that you can just make a 30, 40 movie, you have to make back X amount of dollars on marketing as well. There was a lot of good horror movies that were picked up and released by some of the streaming services that other big name movie studios back in those days wouldn't take a chance on. It's kind of fascinating because in one hand, you look at the way that streaming services, because they are movie studios, try to produce these budgetary systems in order to know exactly what they're going to make back. But horror is actually, I think, a genre that benefits from that model.
I agree with you. And I think I have an inkling just from the clues that you've given of what your number one's going to be. And I'm really interested to hear what you have to say and then likely shoot you down because I think I have a little bit of a different opinion.
Okay. All right.
What's your number one, Ken?
No, you take a guess. What do you think my number one is?
Well, you mentioned last week that it was going to be a Flanagan movie.
Okay.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
Is it Hush?
It is Hush.
I can come in anytime I want. And I can get you anytime I want. But I'm not going to. Not until it's time. When you wish you're dead, that's when I'll come inside.
Yeah, there you go. I'm literally psychic.
Good guess. Okay, so you started out because okay, for those of you who haven't seen Hush, I don't. Apparently, Rev and I are going to disagree about this movie, which I absolutely love. It is I think, phenomenal film. I think it is a very well written movie. I think that it takes home invasion to a different level than what it was before because of the fact that the main character is deaf, and they use it really well in the way that movie is played out. I will say that there are a couple of scenes that I probably would have gone direction or cut, but also those scenes kind of also give an insight into the stalker in that movie as well. So please, why do you, maybe not necessarily, but why would you not like this movie?
No, let me be perfectly clear. Hush is fucking amazing. My disagreement with you is not on the movie because I actually, it was shortly after Hush and Oculus that I had interviewed Mike Flanagan, and I talked pretty extensively about it. I'm a huge fan. I agree with you 100% that the whole deaf involvement in the movie and when I was talking to him about it, he had said that it was kind of inspired by what's the name of that movie, Wait Until Dark, about the blind woman who had the home invasion. It was one of him and Kate's favorite movies, and they had talked about it on a date. They weren't married yet at the time, and they had kind of come up with the idea of Hush together. It's a brilliant idea. My problem with the inclusion of this and the point that you made on my number one was I love that the streaming services audiences are providing such an avenue for artists like Flanagan and even, a lot of people that you'll never even know by name. Flanagan, has obviously hit it big just because of like the overwhelming talent behind the camera. And I mean, God, writing the scripts, he's a phenomenal writer. My problem is the physical media distribution of Netflix. And I know that Flanagan has the same problem. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's going to Amazon now. I believe, what was the Midnight Club? Was that what it was called? No, actually it was Fall of House of Usher.
Yeah, Fall of House of Usher
was
the last
I believe, his last one. And he's going to Amazon now because he has begged them for years to release his movies on physical disc. And that's important because Hush is not on Netflix now. You cannot see this movie. It does not exist. It is as if it was never made.
Interesting.
The only way you can find this movie is to go to IMDb and look it up because it's not streaming anywhere. Netflix took it off their program and they never released a physical copy of the movie.
Yeah.
So as much as I'm a huge fan.
You are right. It is no longer on Netflix. I will say, unless I'm looking up, never mind, because I just wanted to see. Apparently you are correct.
It's not. It hasn't been on Netflix for like a year. And I mean, who knows if it's going to come back? Netflix owns it, despite this being a brilliant man's artistic output. And I, as a physical media buff myself, I mean, I have a wall of movies like literally sitting right beside me as I talk to you. It almost makes me emotional because of how much I hate that such a great thing. And you're dead on in your point. You're absolutely right. Such a phenomenal, great, wonderful thing for horror movie directors specifically, and writers and producers and actors and everything else. But if Netflix decides they don't want your movie out there anymore, it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that is the downside of the whole thing as well. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. And it is interesting that you touch on that. I'm glad that your interview with Mike touched on this as well, because that is so sad, because it is such a phenomenal movie that no one's ever seen. I mean, when I would have to say personally, when somebody says, oh, hey, like, what's a horror movie that I've never seen that you totally, it's like my first one that I go to. It's like, oh, you should check out Hush. And now I know that I can't really recommend that anymore unless people can find it through different means. But
as someone, I mean, one of the reasons why I run my site, thehorrorrevolution.com, shameless self-promotion, one of the reasons why I run my site is to share some love for indie horror movies, because they are what makes the entire horror genre go round, even when you don't realize it. So many people, Larry Fessenden, God, so many people just behind the scenes of these movies. A lot of the people that you love today, Ty West, Adam Wingard, all these people that are helming major franchises now, started because someone gave them a chance, or they took it upon themselves to make this low budget indie horror movie. So I love that Netflix, and honestly even to a greater extent Tubi, gives people the opportunity to release their movies and get them in front of an audience and give themselves a chance to actually have their work be seen. But the fact that they can take that away just because they choose to, and because they're Netflix and your contract is whatever the fuck they say it is, it's a fucking crime. And I'm not somebody who's going to go out there and tell you to buy a bootleg, because I generally think it's a terrible thing for the industry. But Hush is available on bootleg at various places. Just putting that out there. And you absolutely, look, if Netflix isn't going to make it available, fuck them. Mike Flanagan deserves your money. He's not going to get it anyway because Netflix is being a bunch of fucking assholes. So if you have the opportunity to see it, go for it. And if it ever becomes available in physical media where he's going to get a cut of your money, buy that shit again, because it's a fantastic movie. 100% agree, Ken. Good choice.
100%. That movie is phenomenal. I loved every bit about it. That is a movie that I've watched when it was on Netflix several times, to the point where it's just like, when I was over at somebody's house and like, oh, you want to watch it? They're just like, hey, have you seen this movie? I'll watch it again.
But no, I haven't. Let's watch it.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that is, it just, everything about that movie was just great. And that's my number one most overlooked horror movie is Hush, and now I know why it's overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, it's not by choice, god damn it.
Yeah. I mean, to give you a sense of like what Rev is talking about, like, when we look at movies on like IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, and I know that these scores are up to interpretation and subject to different reviewers, but for a horror movie to crack 70% on Rotten or 7.0 on IMDb, that means it's a pretty great. Hush is 93%.
Absolutely.
Like, that's how good this movie is.
And it's so because you're right, that the implementation of her being deaf and like the burglar alarm that has to flash lights because she can't hear it, all those things, it's so smartly done. It's so like, and you can really put yourself in, and I love his wife. I think she's a phenomenal actress, and I've loved her in every single thing she's been in. But she makes you feel what it would be like to have somebody standing right behind you and not knowing they're there because you can't hear them. It's not just the typical girl, look behind you that you always see in like random slasher movies. She doesn't have any way to fucking know because she's deaf. And doing it that way takes a lot of like the stupidity, quote unquote, of the slasher tropes, and makes it totally understandable.
It totally is, and it's such a simplistic movie that it's like there's only, I think, like 5 people in the entire movie, and then the fact that you bring into the fact that she's an author and that she's a writer, so she you go into her mind trying to figure out how she's going to escape and these different things, and she works with scenarios. Just a wonderfully done segment that I think was done 2 or 3 times in that movie. Just, I don't know, just a phenomenal movie all around. I really can't praise this movie. In fact, to the point where I'm like, why is this not on my personal favorite list? Like, now I'm like, wait a minute, did I overlook this when we did the episode 1?
I mean, if you did, you did, man. It's in the can and it's already up. So
I might have to go back and reevaluate that. It's like
nope, doors closed.
Yeah,
it's over.
Listen, I'm gonna tell you this thing right now. The only thing that could have made this movie better was if Joe Anderson.
Hey, maybe Hush 2.
Hush 2.
Maybe Amazon's Hush 2.
That's right. Amazon's Hush 2. Mike, we're going to get together. I'm going to write it. We'll do a Hush 2. Joe, I will have my people call your people. We're going to do lunch. Let's ship it. Done and done.
Look, Ken, I love you, dude. Why don't you let Mike Flanagan write it?
Oh, okay. You know what? That's a good choice. All right. Tell you what, I'm going to step back and do more of the, the associate producer, which is just have my name attached to something without actually doing much to it.
And you just get to stand by Joe Anderson as he films this scene.
Went and found Joe Anderson. Or in my mind, as we've already established, Joe Anderson finds me.
He's outside your house right now. It's like Candyman. You said his name too many times.
He might have been, but then he saw me watching Last House on the Left with no clothes on, and that probably what ended the whole thing.
And now he's knocking on the door because that's exactly what Joe Anderson likes. You know what Joe Anderson likes.
Well, anyway, man, thank you so much for imparting the wisdom upon us about that, the way that Netflix does it. I think that is a crime. Makes me think, I mean, not that I didn't think already a little negatively of Netflix, but a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I can't, if we can start a petition to get this movie just away from the control of Netflix, that would be phenomenal. But yeah, no, I appreciate you taking some time out, spending it with us, not only me, but also the 4 listeners of our podcast, maybe 5.
There are ones of them.
There are ones of them. Anything else? Oh, yeah. Anything else that you want to mention in terms of the podcast or where you can find us or anything like that?
Absolutely. Me personally, I am Rev Horror on everything. Instagram, Twitter, not X. We don't call it X. That's not a fucking thing. Instagram, Twitter, maybe even Reddit. I don't know about Reddit, but all the other things. And then, of course, we have the podcast itself, which is ScareBearsPod on most things. And the email is thescarebearspod@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gotten an email there yet, so I'm not entirely sure.
Well, what are people waiting?
Yeah, that's right. They need to go and follow us on everything. We're going to keep you up to date when we're releasing new episodes, maybe dropping some fun things. Y'all, I have a wall full of movies, and I'm just itching to give away some digital codes and shit like that. So follow us on the socials, listen to the podcast, leave a comment. We are doing this for you because God knows we have had enough of sitting around and talking by ourselves.
That is true. I'm actually surprised that Rev gives me this much time during the day and this just gives you an insight into also the kind of insanity of him, because usually by this point, people have just started tearing out their hair and running in the other direction when I drone this much on about horror movies.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And honestly, same.
Yeah.
We still got to come up with a good sign-off,
I still think that the original sign-off of just, doing stuff when it's